Yes, we hear.
Yes, okay. Can hear you. Perfect. Thank you very much for the invitation, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to see so many people at this very important conference in the ASEAN region. Alex and I are going to give a brief update in relation to IVSC and the importance of valuation standards in a pandemic. Next slide, please, Alex. So who are IVSC? Essentially, we are the global body that is responsible for developing and setting international valuation standards. We also look very much to work in partnership with different professional bodies around the world, because unless you have good professionalism and good professionals operating in each country who also know the local legislation and who also work well in that environment, then it is very difficult for standards to be a success. So actually it's very important to have that combination that's there. We are independent and not-for-profit, and we cover the three main areas of valuation, so tangible assets, business valuation, and financial instruments. And we work very closely with partners such as IASB that set IFRS, the IAASB from an audit perspective, the World Bank as a sponsor, the UN we work very closely with and sometimes issue joint documentation. And we also work with financial regulators to help build that trust in valuation and help develop the global system in the public interest. Next slide, please, Alex. So we have an overarching board of trustees from around the world, and we have, for example, a couple of former finance ministers, one from Asia, one from the UK. We have a World Bank leader, we have an ex-SEC commissioner, we have a senator, and then we have various boards. And the people that come onto these boards are very much leaders in technical expertise and valuation from around the world. So we essentially want to take the best ideas from wherever they are. So if any of you out there decide at some point that you want to contribute to the global approach, then please do feel free to sign up for things like our e-news and apply for positions. Next slide, please, Alex. We have over 170 members and sponsors, and we know that there are professionals that apply IVS in over 103 countries. Next slide, please. In terms of major highlights for us this year, we had an agenda consultation that we put out, and thank you to those of you who contributed to that, which helped set the priorities for the coming years as to how standards need to evolve to address the issues that you see in your markets. We issued new standards on July the 30th of this year, and Alex will touch briefly on those, and they become applicable from the end of January 2022. We found that during COVID, there have been ever higher levels of engagement through social media, perspectives, papers, and webinars. I'll touch on more of those shortly. We've had additional UN recognition and references to IVS in their manual in the approach to land valuation that came out earlier this year. And very importantly, from our point of view, there is a joint valuation working group that has been established with IOSCO. For those of you that don't know IOSCO, essentially it brings together the top regulatory leaders from around the world, from the securities regulators, so they deal with listed companies, that sort of thing. And it's very important for us that we work with the key regulatory leaders around the world to make sure that together we advance standards and professionalism in the public interest. This is a key milestone, and it was a very important step for IFRS in getting IFRS very much used around the world. We have also set up an IVSC Investors Forum, and this brings together valuation leaders from some of the most important and biggest sovereign wealth funds and pension funds in the world, because we very much believe that it's important to have the perspective of buyers of valuation services when it comes to enhancing the quality of the standards. So very much people that would look to buy services across the world from your valuers. And so it's an important perspective. We have also received a proposal, and we hope that next year we might be able to set up an Asia office for IVSC. which will be an important addition that helps us both enhance the focus on an important region being Asia, as well as incorporate extra staffing that can help with the global agenda we have and help with the global boards that we have. Next slide, please, Alex. One of the things that you might have seen us doing more and more of, and if you haven't, I'd encourage you to sign up for e-news or go to our website, is perspectives papers. And these are not standards, but they're there to provide insights, initiate dialogue and debate on new and major trends that shape valuation. And we offer our perspectives in those areas, but we very much put them there to get greater engagement and feedback on topical issues from organisations such as yourselves. Next slide, please, Alex. So these are some of the papers that we have issued in the last year, and it covers everything from ESG and tangible assets, goodwill, topical issues that are out there that affect valuation. And each of your organisations is very welcome to use these materials and communicate them to your members if it's something that you find useful. Next slide, please, Alex. And we have also increased the different webinars that we do, where we bring experts together from the different regions around the world, and they discuss topical issues, whether it's in alternative investment or valuation and the impact of ESG, which everyone is talking about, or particularly slightly more technical issues such as operating leases under IFRS and US GAAP, and the valuation considerations for that. And we're happy to address different topics. If you think that there's a topic that's particularly significant for your organisation, then we would be happy to look at that. More recently, we had webinars on valuation of unregistered land, which is a key issue in some countries, ESG and the impact on tangible assets, and also a focus on intangibles too, which obviously of increasing importance to the world when you consider the amount of value that different companies derive from that. Next slide, please, Alex. And so I'd encourage you, if you want to use these webinars in your organisations, if you want to translate them, you're very welcome to do that. And before I hand over to Alex, I just want to make a few comments. What began as a health crisis has obviously become an economic crisis, and that brings huge uncertainty in the world. What is clear to me is the need for good valuations has never been greater to help restore certainty and to help economies improve again. So please do keep up the good work that each and every one of you is doing in this regard, because I don't think valuation has ever been more important. And who knows, hopefully next year we'll be able to have this conference in person. I'll now hand over to Alex, who is going to provide a more technical insight. Please, Alex.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak at the 23rd AVA conference. First of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the International Valuation Standards latest updates before going into the importance of valuation standards in a pandemic. Now, the International and Valuation Standards include common valuation principles and asset standards, and it's divided into two main sections: the general standards, which is IVS 101 to 105, and they deal with everything from your initial valuation instruction all the way to your final report. And there's chapters on scope of work, investigations and compliance, reporting, basis of value, and approaches and methods. Separately to this, there are the asset standards, and the asset standards provide further detail in relation to the general standards. So valuers who are dealing with, for example, real property assets would need to comply with IVS 101 to IVS 105, the general standards, and then IVS 400 real property assets. Now, the international valuation standards are quite concise. They're only about 135 pages long, and all of the IVS are mandatory. And the latest edition of the International Valuation Standards was published on the 31st of July, and it has an effective date of the 31st of January 2022, but early adoption is encouraged. And just giving you a very brief overview of some of the key changes within the International Valuation Standards, all of which have come from an open, transparent, collaborative consultation process, which began in 2020 with the issue of the IVS 230 Inventories Exposure Draft, came through our agenda consultation and our additional technical revisions prior to publication. And just looking at some of the changes here and going through them quickly, there's core principles for all valuation professional organizations contained within the introduction. There's some additional definitions. There's a new section on allocation of value, giving you the overarching principles for allocating value, and when allocating value, if the sum of the parts do not equal the whole, you have to explain the difference. There's a revised scope for business and business interests. There is a new chapter on inventories, and there is a revised scope for IVS 400 real property interests, which now includes unregistered or informal land. So when you are valuing unregistered or informal land, you can still value them using the International Valuation Standards. And you can see here the core principles of valuation standard setting and the core principles of valuation contained within the introduction. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to note two of them, which are extremely important, particularly in times of pandemic. Ethics. Valuers must follow the ethical principles of integrity, objectivity, impartiality, confidentiality, competence, and professionalism to promote and preserve the public trust. And competency. At the time the valuation is submitted, valuers must have the technical skills and knowledge required to appropriately complete the valuation assignment. And you'll notice that we have a number of new definitions within the latest edition of IVS. Now, many of these definitions, the definitions such as equitable value, fair market value, fair value, investment value, market rent, were already contained within the standard. But in order to make it more user-friendly, we decided to include these definitions, which were already in 105 basis valuation approaches and methods within the glossary. We have added a few other terms that are worth noting. When we refer to valuation, we're actually talking about the process. So the act or process of determining an opinion or conclusion of a value of an asset on a stated basis of value at a specified date in compliance with IVS. When we're talking about value, we're talking about the end result, the opinion resulting from a valuation process that is compliant with IVS. It's an estimate of either the most probable monetary consideration for an interest in an asset or the economic benefits of holding an interest in an asset on a stated basis of value. Now, I'd like to just talk briefly about the importance of valuation standards in a pandemic, because this is something particularly that we've all been dealing with. Under IVS 103 reporting, it requires the valuation report to disclose a number of matters, including any significant uncertainty or limiting conditions that directly affect the valuation. And this is shown by section 10.1, which states it's essential that the valuation report communicates the information necessary for proper understanding of the valuation or valuation review. A report must provide the intended users with a clear understanding of the valuation. And section 10.2 states to provide useful information, the report must set out a clear and accurate description of the scope of the assignment, its purpose and intended use, including any limitations on that use, and disclosure of any assumptions, special assumptions, significant uncertainty, which is something that we've definitely been going through recently, or limiting conditions that directly affect the valuation. I'd also like to point you to a paper that we published towards the beginning of the pandemic on dealing with valuation uncertainty at times of market unrest. Valuation uncertainty can be caused by various factors. These can be broadly divided into the following categories: market disruption, input availability, choice of method or model. These causes of valuation uncertainty are not mutually exclusive. For example, market disruption may affect the most appropriate method or model to use. Interdependence and correlation between the causes of uncertainty are therefore likely to exist, and account should be taken of this during the valuation process. And IVS 105 is very clear about this. It states in section 10.4, however, valuers should consider the use of multiple approaches and methods, and more than one valuation approach or method should be considered and may be used to arrive at an indication of value, particularly when there are insufficient factual or observable inputs for a single method to produce a reliable conclusion. And therefore, we would definitely point out that this is a point in time where you would need to use more than one method within your valuation to get any form of certainty. And I should make clear that valuation uncertainty shouldn't be confused with risk. Risk is the exposure that the owner of an asset has to potential future gains or losses. Risks can be caused by various factors affecting either the asset itself or the market in which it trades. And examples include, for tangible assets, reduction in market prices after the date of acquisition or valuation, a deterioration in the projected future income or security, a loss of liquidity comparing with other assets, and there are many other examples. So risk is part of what we deal with every day. Uncertainty is something that we've been facing, particularly during these times of the pandemic. And in these times, the importance of valuation standards and working to evaluation standards become even more important. They help increase market stability, particularly in instances such as secured lending. Different values for the same asset or inconsistent values across asset classes would further worsen market stability. It's extremely important to note that uniform, high-quality valuation standards provide a framework that enhances the ability of investors, regulators, and other interested parties to improve their decisions and actions. And when we're looking at valuation standards in a pandemic, there's some bits that are important to point out. Competence. It's extremely important that the valuations are undertaken by competent valuers, such as the members of AVA. There needs to be consistent reporting within asset classes and across asset classes. And this does not only reduce the risk and the liability for investors and stakeholders and the users of valuation report, but more importantly, it reduces the risk and reliability for valuers, the fact that they can show that they were working to the international valuation standards during the pandemic. And particularly important during this time is documentation and making sure that you have sufficient documentation within your valuation reports. Because if litigation does come, it won't be now, it will be several years from now. And those files that you have with your valuations and your valuation documentation would be your defense against any future litigation or liability. Once again, I would like to thank you all for giving us the time to present. Thank you very much, and I wish you well with the rest of your conference. Thank you, Sir Stay.